London, the winter of 1893. There are cases in my long association with Mr. Sherlock Holmes that I have set down with a sense of professional satisfaction. Cases where reason triumphed over darkness and justice was served in the end. There are others that I have recorded with a heavier hand, cases that revealed depths of human cruelty that no verdict could fully address, cases that left me questioning the very nature of the world in which we live. The affair I now propose to relate belongs firmly in the second category. It is a case that spanned 3 decades and claimed 5 lives before Sherlock Holmes brought it to its terrible conclusion. It is a case that touched upon superstition and greed, upon love and hatred, upon the strange power that certain objects can exert over the human imagination. And it is a case that I have hesitated to write down for many years, not because the mystery itself was beyond my friend's ability to solve, for he solved it with his customary brilliance, but because the truth, when it finally emerged, was of a kind that made me weep for the innocent and shudder at what human beings can do to one another in the pursuit of what they desire. But I am a chronicler. It is my duty to record what happened, however painful the recording may be. And so I take up my pen at last, and I begin the strange and terrible story of the painting that killed everyone who owned it. It was a bitter January morning when the case first came to our attention. London was locked in the grip of the coldest winter in living memory. The Thames had frozen from bank to bank near London Bridge, thick enough for men to walk upon. The parks were white with snow that had not melted for nearly a month. The streets were treacherous with ice, and every morning brought news of accidents, of horses that had slipped and broken their legs, of elderly persons who had fallen and been unable to rise, of children who had wandered into the cold and never returned. Holmes and I were breakfasting in our sitting room at 221B Baker Street. The fire was blazing in the grate. Mrs. Hudson had provided us with hot coffee, buttered toast, and a dish of thick porridge with cream. The gas lamps were still burning even though the hour was well past 9, for the winter sun had not yet been able to penetrate the thick fog that hung over Baker Street. Holmes was in a curious mood that morning. He had risen early and dressed with unusual care. He had shaved with particular attention. He had chosen his darkest and most formal suit. When I remarked upon this, he smiled slightly. "I am expecting a visitor, Watson." "A visitor? At this hour?" "At 9:30. A lady of considerable social standing. She wrote to me 2 days ago requesting an appointment on a matter of great importance to her family. I have replied agreeing to receive her this morning." "Who is she?" "Her name is Lady Blackthorne." "Blackthorne? Is that not a name I have heard recently?" "You have almost certainly seen it in the newspapers, Watson. Her husband, Sir Arthur Blackthorne, died 3 weeks ago under somewhat mysterious circumstances. He was found dead in his study at Blackthorne Manor on the morning of the 14th of December. The cause of death was officially recorded as heart failure. But there were, apparently, certain features of the death that troubled his family. And now his widow has come to consult me. You have accepted the case already?" "I have accepted the consultation. Whether I take the case will depend upon what Lady Blackthorne tells me this morning." Before I could ask further questions, the doorbell rang. A moment later, Mrs. Hudson ascended the stairs and announced our visitor. Lady Blackthorne was a woman of perhaps 50 years of age, small and slight in build, dressed entirely in the black of deep mourning. Her face was pale beneath a black veil that she raised as she entered the room. Her eyes were gray and steady, though shadowed with grief. She carried herself with the quiet dignity of a woman who has been well born and well raised, and who has learned, through long practice, to conceal her feelings behind a mask of composure. She was accompanied by a younger woman of perhaps 25, similarly dressed in mourning. This second lady was tall, with the same gray eyes as her elder companion, but her face bore a Raywar quality of grief. Her cheeks were streaked with the marks of recent tears. Her hands, as she removed her gloves, were trembling. Dr. Watson, thank you for receiving us. I am Lady Blackthorne. This is my daughter, Miss Emma Blackthorne." Holmes bowed and indicated the 2 armchairs by the fire. "Please sit down, Lady Blackthorne. Miss Blackthorne. Watson, if you would ring for fresh coffee. Our guests have come a considerable distance in this cold weather. The two ladies seated themselves. Lady Blackthorne arranged her mourning veil with the care of long practice. Miss Blackthorne sat very still, her hands folded in her lap, her gray eyes moving between Holmes and me with an expression that was difficult to read. There was grief in her look, certainly. But there was something else as well. Something that might, in another context, have been called fear. Lady Blackthorne, Holmes began gently, I have received your letter and I understand the general nature of your concern. But I should like to hear the details from you directly. Please tell me what has happened. Lady Blackthorne was silent for a moment. She seemed to be composing herself for what she was about to say. When she spoke, her voice was low and controlled, though I could hear the strain beneath it. My husband, Sir Arthur Blackthorne, died on the morning of the 14th of December. He was 62 years old. He had been in generally good health, though he suffered from occasional attacks of gout and from the usual complaints of a man of his age. He was found by his valet at 7 o'clock in the morning, lying on the floor of his private study at Blackthorne Manor. He had been dead for some hours. The doctor who was summoned, our family physician, Dr. Palmer, gave his opinion that death had been caused by heart failure, brought on by the exertion of a violent quarrel or shock. She paused. Her hands, resting in her lap, tightened slightly. But no one had quarreled with my husband that night, Mr. Holmes. He had spent the evening alone. He had dined in his study, as was his frequent custom. His valet had brought him coffee at 10 o'clock and had then been dismissed for the night. My husband had told his valet that he intended to work late on certain documents and did not wish to be disturbed. That was the last time anyone spoke to him alive. And what caused you to doubt Dr. Palmer's opinion? Lady Blackthorne's gray eyes met Holmes's directly. Because my husband, Mr. Holmes, is the 5th owner of a particular painting to die in this manner. And every one of the previous 4 owners died at roughly the same age and in roughly the same circumstances. Every one of them died alone. Every one of them died at night. Every one of them was found the next morning. One of them died at night. Every one of them was found the next morning, cold and dead, with no obvious cause. And every one of them was pronounced by their doctors to have died of natural causes. The room was silent. The fire crackled. I saw Holmes lean forward very slightly, his gray eyes fixed upon Lady Blackthorne with the intense concentration that always marked the beginning of his engagement with a case. Tell me about the painting, Lady Blackthorne. She reached into a small leather portfolio she had brought with her and withdrew a photograph. She handed it to Holmes. Holmes examined the photograph for a long moment. Then, without a word, he passed it to me. The photograph showed a large oil painting in an ornate gilt frame. The painting was a portrait of a woman. She appeared to be perhaps 30 years of age, though it was difficult to be certain from a photograph. She was dressed in the fashion of the early Victorian period, in a dark gown with a high collar and long sleeves. Her hair was dark and elaborately arranged. Her face was pale and rather beautiful in a severe, aristocratic way. She held nothing in her hands, which were folded in her lap. She was seated in what appeared to be a wooden chair, against a dark, undefined background. But it was her eyes that most caught my attention. They were extraordinarily painted, dark, piercing. They seemed to look directly out of the photograph at the viewer, following the eye no matter where one stood. Even in the flat black and white of the photographic reproduction, there was something disturbing about those eyes, a watchfulness, an intelligence, an expression that seemed to hold within it some secret knowledge that the viewer could not share. I looked up at Lady Blackthorne. Who is she? That, Dr. Watson, is what nobody knows. The painting has been in existence for 30 years. It has passed through 5 owners, including my husband. Not one of those owners knew, with certainty, who the woman in the portrait was. Some have speculated, some have offered theories, but nobody knows. She took the photograph back from me and returned it to her portfolio. The painting is called The Watching Woman. It was painted, according to what my husband was able to discover, in the year 1863 by an artist whose identity has never been established. The painting appeared for the first time in 1863 at the studio of an art dealer named Jonathan Whitby on Bond Street. Whitby claimed that the painting had been brought to him by a young man who wished to remain anonymous. The young man had asked Whitby to display the painting for sale, but had refused to give his name. Whitby displayed the painting. It attracted immediate attention. There was something about the eyes, everyone said, that caught the viewer's attention and held it. The painting was purchased within a week by a wealthy gentleman named Lord Marcus Blackwood. Lady Blackthorne paused. Lord Blackwood was the first of the 5 owners to die. Tell me about his death. He purchased the painting in June of 1863. He hung it in the library of his London townhouse in Grosvenor Square. He was, by all accounts, delighted with his acquisition. He spoke of the painting frequently to his friends. He said the eyes seemed to watch him wherever he went in the room. He said it was the most remarkable portrait he had ever seen. In August of 1867, 4 years after he had purchased the painting, Lord Blackwood was found dead in his library. He had been sitting in his favorite armchair before the fire, apparently reading a book. The book was open on his lap. His head had fallen forward onto his chest. His hands were folded across the book. He appeared, at first glance, to be sleeping. But he was dead, cold and dead. He had been dead for many hours. His doctor, an eminent physician named Sir Henry Rawlins, examined the body and pronounced that Lord Blackwood had died of a sudden heart failure. There were no marks of violence upon him, no signs of poison, no indication of any struggle or disturbance in the room. The doors and windows were locked from the inside. The library was undisturbed. Everything was in its proper place. Everything, that is, except for the painting. The painting hung directly opposite Lord Blackwood's armchair, and when the servants entered the room that morning, they found their master sitting dead in his chair, his eyes closed, and the painted eyes of the woman on the wall staring down at him. Lady Blackthorne's voice had grown quieter. I could see that this was not merely a factual recitation for her. This was a story that had haunted her family for many years. After Lord Blackwood's death, the painting was inherited by his son, along with the rest of his father's estate. But the son, a young man of 30 who had never much cared for his father's collection of paintings, decided to sell it. He put it up for auction at Christie's in November of 1867. The painting was purchased at that auction by Sir Reginald Ashworth. Sir Reginald Ashworth was a wealthy banker and connoisseur of the arts. He was a man of great taste and considerable knowledge. He acquired the painting because he believed, having examined it carefully, that it was the work of a significant but unknown master. He hoped in time to be able to identify the painter. He never had the opportunity. Sir Reginald Ashworth was found dead in his study on the morning of the 3rd of April, 1871. He had been sitting at his desk, working on some financial papers. His head had fallen forward onto the desk. His right hand still held his pen. There were no marks of violence upon him, no indication of any struggle. The doors and windows of his study were locked from the inside. He had, according to his doctor, died of a sudden heart failure. The painting hung on the wall directly opposite his desk. It was untouched, perfect, watching. Lady Blackthorne paused. She took a small sip from the coffee that Mrs. Hudson had brought. I could tell you of the other 3 deaths in similar detail, Mr. Holmes, but the essential pattern is the same in every case. Mr. Percival Gray, who purchased the painting from Sir Reginald's estate, was found dead in his sitting room on the morning of the 12th of September, 1878. Lord Wentworth, who purchased it from Mr. Gray's estate, was found dead in his library on the morning of the 23rd of June, 1889. And my husband, Sir Arthur Blackthorne, who purchased the painting from Lord Wentworth's estate, was found dead in his study on the morning of the 14th of December, 1893. 5 owners, 5 deaths. All alone, all at night, all apparently of natural causes. And in every case the painting was there, hanging on the wall, its eyes watching, its expression unchanged. The silence in our sitting room was absolute. The fire crackled softly. Miss Emma Blackthorne, who had not spoken since her introduction, was staring at the floor. Her hands were still tightly clasped in her lap. Holmes was silent for a long moment. His gray eyes were fixed upon Lady Blackthorne with an expression I could not quite read. It was not skepticism. It was not credulity. It was something more like patient, focused attention. The attention of a man who has heard many strange stories in his life and who has learned to listen carefully to every one of them, regardless of how impossible they might sound. "Lady Blackthorne," he said at last, "I must ask you a question that may seem to you impertinent, but I must ask it. Do you believe that the painting itself is responsible for the deaths of its owners?" Lady Blackthorne met his gaze steadily. "I do not know what to believe, Mr. Holmes. I am a woman of some education. I have been raised in the Christian faith. I do not believe in curses or supernatural evil. And yet the facts of the matter are as I have stated them. 5 men have owned this painting. 5 men have died, all in the same manner, all alone, all at night, all apparently of natural causes. Perhaps it is coincidence, Mr. Holmes. Perhaps the painting itself has nothing to do with the deaths. Perhaps each of these men died for reasons that had nothing to do with the picture they happened to own. That is possible. But if it is coincidence, it is the most remarkable coincidence in the annals of art collecting, and it has now touched my family. My husband is dead. My daughter has lost her father. Our world has been shattered, and I want to know why." She leaned forward slightly. "I have come to you, Mr. Holmes, because I have heard that you are the greatest detective in England. I have come to you because if there is a rational explanation for these deaths, I believe you are the man who can find it. And if there is no rational explanation, if there truly is something evil about this painting, then I want to know that too, so that we can destroy it and put an end to this." Miss Emma Blackthorne looked up for the first time since she had sat down. "Mr. Holmes," she said. Her voice was low and slightly tremulous. "There is something else, something my mother has not mentioned." Lady Blackthorne turned to her daughter with a look of surprise. "Emma, we agreed that we would not speak of that until later." "I know, Mother. But if Mr. Holmes is to help us, he must know everything. I cannot bear to keep secrets from him." She turned back to Holmes. "I cannot bear to keep secrets from him." She turned back to Holmes. "2 nights before my father died, I saw something. I have not spoken of it to anyone except my mother, and she has forbidden me to speak of it publicly because she is afraid it will make our family look foolish. But I know what I saw. What did you see, Miss Blackthorne?" Emma took a deep breath. "I had gone to my father's study to bring him a book he had asked for. It was late, perhaps 11 o'clock at night. The house was quiet. Everyone had gone to bed. As I approached the door of the study, I heard my father speaking. I thought he must have someone with him. I paused before knocking, and then I heard my father say, very clearly, quote, 'I do not know what you want from me. Please leave me alone,' unquote. He was speaking to someone. But when I opened the door, there was no one there. My father was alone. He was sitting in his armchair facing the painting. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. When he saw me, he tried to smile, but the smile did not reach his eyes. I asked him if he was well. He said he was tired. He said he had been dozing and had spoken in his sleep. I did not believe him. His voice, when I had heard it through the door, had been fully awake. It had been the voice of a man having a conversation with someone. But there was no one in the room. No one but my father and the painting." She paused. Her gray eyes filled with tears. 2 nights later, he was dead. Holmes had been listening to this with intense concentration. He did not immediately respond. He rose from his chair and walked to the window. He stood there for perhaps a minute, looking out at the fog and the snow. When he turned back, his face was grave. "Lady Blackthorne, Miss Blackthorne, I shall take your case. But I must warn you that I intend to approach it as a rational investigator, seeking rational explanations. I do not believe in curses. I do not believe in supernatural evil. I believe that every human death has a cause that can be identified, and that every mystery has a solution that can be discovered. If the painting has somehow caused these deaths, it has done so through mechanisms that operate in the natural world, not the supernatural. That is my starting assumption, and I shall not depart from it unless the evidence forces me to do so." "That is precisely what we want, Mr. Holmes." "Very well. I shall need to visit Blackthorne Manor. I shall need to see the painting. I shall need to speak with the servants and with any other members of your household. I shall need to examine your husband's study and the room in which the painting is currently hung. May I come to Blackthorn Manor tomorrow?" "You may come whenever you wish, Mr. Holmes. My daughter and I are staying at our London house on Cavendish Square during the period of mourning. The manor is being kept by our staff. I shall telegraph the housekeeper to expect you." "Excellent. Watson, would you care to accompany me?" "Of course, Holmes." "Then we shall travel to Blackthorn Manor tomorrow morning." Lady Blackthorn and her daughter rose. Holmes bowed to them. "Lady Blackthorn, Miss Blackthorn. Before you go, I have one further question. You mentioned that the painting has passed through 5 owners in 30 years. Each owner died. Each owner's family then sold the painting to the next owner. Is that correct?" "That is correct, Mr. Holmes." "And in each case, was the sale conducted through an auction house or through a private dealer?" Lady Blackthorn considered. "I believe the first sale after Lord Blackwood's death was through Christie's. I am not certain about the others. My husband was very interested in the history of the painting and had traced its ownership carefully. His records will be at the manor. You may examine them tomorrow." "Thank you. That will be most helpful." The 2 ladies took their leave. When they had gone, Holmes turned to me with an expression of unusual gravity. "Well, Watson, what do you make of it?" "It is a strange story, Holmes. Very strange indeed." "It is more than strange, Watson. It is impossible. 5 men do not die of natural causes in identical circumstances over a period of 30 years by pure coincidence. There is something behind these deaths. Something rational, I am convinced. Though what precisely it may be, I cannot yet say. You do not believe the painting is cursed?" Holmes smiled slightly. "I believe, Watson, that if the painting has any power to kill its owners, that power is exercised through means that can be understood and ultimately defeated. I do not deny the possibility of the unknown. I merely insist that the unknown, when properly investigated, always turns out to be knowable." He returned to his chair and filled his pipe. "There are several possibilities to consider. First, that the deaths are indeed coincidental, and that we are seeing a pattern where none exists. This is unlikely given the specific similarities in the circumstances of each death, but it cannot be entirely ruled out. Second, that there is something about the painting itself, some chemical or physical property, that has affected the health of its owners. The pigments used in Victorian paintings often contain toxic compounds: arsenic, lead, mercury. Prolonged exposure to certain painted surfaces can cause serious illness. This is a possibility that will require chemical investigation. Third, that there is a human agency behind the deaths. That someone, for reasons of their own, has been killing the owners of this painting one after another over a period of 30 years. This is the possibility that interests me most, Watson, because if it is true, we are dealing with a criminal of extraordinary patience, extraordinary discipline, and extraordinary purpose. But what could be the motive, Holmes? Why kill the owners of a single painting over 30 years? That, my dear Watson, is the question we must answer. And I suspect that when we find the answer, we shall find it is connected somehow to the painting itself. Not to the image on its surface, but to something the painting contains, or conceals. You think there is something hidden in the painting? I think it is possible. Paintings can conceal many things. Documents, small objects, secret messages. A painting is not merely an image. It is a physical object with a canvas and a frame and a backing, all of which can be used to hide things. He drew on his pipe. But we are speculating too far in advance of the evidence, Watson. Tomorrow we shall go to Blackthorn Manor. We shall see the painting for ourselves. And then we shall know a great deal more than we do now. The following morning was bitterly cold. Snow had fallen during the night, adding a fresh white layer to what was already lying on the ground. Holmes and I took the 7 o'clock train from Paddington Station. Blackthorn Manor lay in the county of Surrey, some 30 miles from London, near the small village of Blackthorn-under-Hill. We were the only passengers in our compartment. Holmes was silent for most of the journey, staring out at the frozen countryside as it passed. Once or twice he made notes in his small leather notebook. Occasionally he asked me a question, or made a brief observation, but for the most part he seemed lost in thought. "Watson," he said at last, as we were approaching our destination, "I have been considering the timeline of these deaths. Lord Blackwood died in 1867, 4 years after acquiring the painting. Sir Reginald Ashworth died in 1871, 4 years after acquiring it. Mr. Percival Grey died in 1878, 7 years after acquiring it. Lord Wentworth died in 1889, 11 years after acquiring it. And Sir Arthur Blackthorne died in 1893, 4 years after acquiring it. The intervals are irregular. They are, which is interesting. If the painting itself were killing its owners through some chemical or physical mechanism, we would expect the intervals to be more consistent. The fact that they vary from 4 to 11 years suggests that the deaths are being caused by an external agent and that this agent operates on its own timetable, not on the painting's. Someone is choosing when to kill each owner, precisely, and that someone must have some connection to each owner, some means of gaining access to them at the appropriate moment, some knowledge of their habits and their households. But how? Over 30 years? The owners have been very different people, living in different places with different lives. What could connect them? The painting, Watson. Only the painting connects them. That is the constant. Everything else has changed. The train pulled into the small station at Blackthorne-under-Hill. A carriage was waiting for us, sent by the housekeeper of the manor. We climbed in, and the driver, a taciturn old man wrapped in a heavy fur coat, urged his horses forward through the snowy lanes. Blackthorne Manor rose before us at the end of a long tree-lined drive. It was a magnificent building of gray stone, Elizabethan in its origins, but with later additions. 3 stories tall, 20 windows facing the drive, a great central door with stone columns on either side. In the winter light, with snow lying on its roof and drifts piled against its walls, it looked both beautiful and forbidding, like a fortress from an older age. The carriage drew up before the main entrance. We were greeted by the housekeeper, a Mrs. Foster, a woman of perhaps 60 years, tall and thin, with a face that seemed permanently set in an expression of quiet sorrow. She took our coats and hats. She led us into the great hall. The great hall of Blackthorne Manor was magnificent, vaulted timber ceiling, stone floor. Enormous fireplace at one end, in which a fire was burning brightly, portraits of Blackthorne ancestors on the walls, suits of armor standing in the corners. It was the great hall of a family that had held its position for many generations, and it spoke of wealth and continuity and quiet pride. "Mr. Dr. Watson, Lady Blackthorne has instructed me to show you every courtesy and to answer any questions you may have. I have been housekeeper at Blackthorne Manor for 27 years. I served Sir Arthur's father before him. I knew Sir Arthur since he was a boy." Her voice caught slightly on his name. She composed herself. "I have prepared the guest bedrooms in the east wing for you. Mrs. Baxter, the cook, will provide luncheon at 1 o'clock. In the meantime, is there anything you wish to see or anyone you wish to speak with?" "Mrs. Foster," Holmes said, "we should like first to see the painting, and then we should like to see Sir Arthur's study, where he died." "Of course, Mr. Holmes. The painting hangs in the library. Please follow me." She led us up a wide oak staircase to the first floor, along a broad corridor, through a set of double doors, into the library of Blackthorne Manor. The library was a magnificent room, 2 stories high, walls lined from floor to ceiling with leather-bound books. A wooden gallery running around the upper level, accessed by 2 ornate staircases, deep leather armchairs, reading tables with green-shaded lamps, Persian rugs on the floor, a great stone fireplace at one end, and on the wall opposite the fireplace, in a heavy gilt frame, hung the painting, The Watching Woman. I found myself walking toward it before I had consciously decided to do so. There was something about the painting that drew the eye, something that made one want to see it more closely. The photograph had not done it justice. In the flesh, so to speak, the painting was extraordinary. The woman's face seemed almost alive. The pale skin appeared to glow softly in the winter light. The dark hair had a depth and richness that no photograph could capture. The dress was rendered in exquisite detail. every fold, every shadow. But the eyes were something else entirely. They were dark, almost black, and they seemed to look directly at me. Not at where I had been standing a moment before. Not at some point in the middle of the room. At me, at my face, at my own eyes. I moved to the left. The painted eyes followed me. I moved to the right. The painted eyes followed me. I stepped closer. The painted eyes remained fixed on my face. I stepped back to the doorway. The painted eyes still watched me. An old trick of the painter's craft, Holmes said behind me, called the Mona Lisa effect. The eyes are painted in such a way that they appear to follow the viewer regardless of the viewing angle. It is achieved by painting the pupils in the exact center of the eye, and by ensuring that the highlights on the iris are placed symmetrically. Many portraits use this effect, but few use it as effectively as this one. He had joined me at the painting. He was examining it closely, his sharp gray eyes moving over every detail. The painter was highly skilled, Watson. The technique is exceptional. The rendering of the fabric is masterful. The flesh tones are subtle and beautiful. This is not the work of an amateur or a minor artist. Whoever painted this was a considerable talent. Then why is he unknown? That is one of the questions we must answer. But note the frame, Watson. Look at the carving. Look at the gilding. This is a frame of extraordinary quality. Late Georgian, I would say, but it may be even older. The painting itself is more recent. The frame has been reused, which is unusual. Painters generally commission new frames for new works. He examined the frame more carefully, running his fingertips along the ornate carving. There are marks here, Watson. Look, in the corners, where the frame joins together. Marks that appear to have been made recently, within the last few weeks. I looked. I could see the marks he indicated. Small scratches in the gilding, as though something had been pressed against the frame or twisted within it. Someone has been examining the frame recently, trying perhaps to open it or to remove the painting from it. Sir Arthur? Possibly. Or someone else. Someone who has had access to this room. Holmes stepped back from the painting. Mrs. Foster, who has been in this room since Sir Arthur died. The housekeeper had been standing quietly by the door. She came forward. Only myself and the housemaids, Mr. Holmes. The room has been kept locked at other times. Lady Blackthorne instructed that nothing was to be disturbed. When were the housemaids last in here? Yesterday morning. They come in twice a week to dust and to attend to the fire. And they touched nothing? Nothing, Mr. Holmes. They know their duties. Was anything in the room disturbed when they last came in? Mrs. Foster hesitated. There was one small thing, Mr. Holmes. It seemed of no importance at the time. But now that you ask, what was it? When Mary, the head housemaid, came in yesterday morning, she noticed that the painting was not quite straight on the wall. It was tilted very slightly to one side. She adjusted it. It seemed to her that someone must have brushed against it or bumped it in some way. But of course the room had been locked. No one should have been in here since her previous visit. Holmes and I exchanged a look. He turned to Mrs. Foster. When was the previous visit? 3 days before. On the Thursday. So between Thursday morning and Sunday morning someone was in this locked room and moved the painting? So it would seem, Mr. Holmes, though I cannot imagine how. Only Lady Blackthorne and I have keys. And Sir Arthur? Sir Arthur had a key, of course. Before his death, his keys. Where are they now? They were returned to Lady Blackthorne. She keeps them in her private safe in London. Holmes nodded slowly. Mrs. Foster. I should like to see Sir Arthur's study now. Sir Arthur's study was on the ground floor, in the western wing of the house. It was a smaller room than the library, but similarly furnished. Leather chairs, wooden desk, bookshelves, Persian carpet, a fireplace in which no fire was now burning, tall windows looking out onto the snow-covered lawns. The room was empty, preserved exactly as it had been on the morning Sir Arthur was found. He was here, Mr. Holmes, on the floor, just here, Mrs. Z. Foster indicated a spot on the carpet near the fireplace, perhaps 8 feet from the desk. He was lying on his side. His arms were at his sides. His eyes were closed. His face was peaceful. If not for the fact that he was so cold, he might have been sleeping. His position when found. He was on his side, you say. Not on his back or his face. On his left side, Mr. Holmes. Facing the fireplace or facing the door? Facing the door. And where was Dr. Palmer standing when he examined the body? Beside the body, Mr. Holmes. He knelt down to make his examination. He was very thorough. Holmes moved slowly around the room. He examined the desk. He examined the chair behind the desk. He examined the carpet where Sir Arthur had been found. He examined the fireplace. He examined the windows. He examined the door. Then he stopped. He was standing near a small side table that held a decanter and glasses. Mrs. Foster, was Sir Arthur drinking that night? He had asked his valet to bring him a bottle of port from the cellar. The valet did so and set it on the side table. Sir Arthur then dismissed the valet for the night. And the port was found the next morning? Yes, Mr. Holmes, the bottle was there, and one glass. Nearly empty. So Sir Arthur had drunk most of the glass. Yes. Where is the bottle now? Dr. Palmer took it away, Mr. Holmes. He said it should be tested for poison. But the tests showed nothing. The port was pure. He tested it? Yes. He arranged for it to be analyzed by a chemist in London. The report came back several days later. There was nothing in the port that should not have been there. I see. And the glass? The glass was washed with the other dishes that day. Before Dr. Palmer thought to examine it, Holmes's expression did not change, but I could see a flicker of frustration in his eyes, evidence lost through carelessness. It was a familiar problem in his cases. He continued his examination of the room. He looked under the desk. He looked behind the curtains. He examined the fireplace and looked up the chimney. He tested the floorboards for any that might be loose. He found nothing that appeared, to my observation, to be of particular significance. At last he turned to Mrs. Foster. Mrs. Foster, I have one more question, and it is a delicate one. Do you know of anyone who might have wished harm to Sir Arthur? Any enemies? Any disputes? Any quarrels? Mrs. Foster hesitated. Sir Arthur was a difficult man, Mr. Holmes. Not cruel, not vicious, but strict, demanding. He had high standards. He expected those around him to meet those standards. When they did not, he was quick to make his displeasure known. He had enemies then? He had people who disliked him. Yes. Some of his tenants, some business rivals, but enemies who would kill him. I cannot think of any. His family, his wife and daughter, what were his relations with them? Mrs. Foster hesitated again. She seemed reluctant to speak. Please, Mrs. Foster, I need the truth, however uncomfortable it may be. Very well, Mr. Holmes. The truth is that Sir Arthur was not always kind to his wife. He was often cold with her. Distant. He spent little time in her company. As for his daughter, Miss Emma, he loved her, I believe. But he did not always show it. He was disappointed that she had not married. She is 25 now, and she has had suitors, but Sir Arthur did not approve of any of them. There had been considerable friction between them on that account. Recent friction? Yes. There was a young man, a Mr. Anthony Hooley. He is the son of a neighboring family. Miss Emma became attached to him during the summer. She wished to marry him. Sir Arthur refused his consent. He said Mr. Rowley had no fortune of his own, and was therefore unsuitable. There were arguments. Miss Emma was very unhappy. Sir Arthur was very firm. Was very unhappy. Sir Arthur was very firm. Is Mr. Rowley still in the neighborhood? Yes, Mr. Holmes. His family estate is only 3 miles from here. Holmes made a small note in his book. Thank you, Mrs. Foster. You have been most helpful. Now, if you would kindly leave us for a while, I should like to spend some time alone in this room. Mrs. Foster left. Holmes and I stood in silence in the room where Sir Arthur Blackthorne had died. Watson, what do you make of it? I hardly know, Holmes. The room offers no obvious clues, no signs of violence, no signs of struggle. If Sir Arthur was murdered, the murderer was very careful indeed. Yes, or very lucky. Note this, Watson. Sir Arthur was found on his left side, facing the door. He was 8 feet from the desk. If he had been sitting at the desk when he was taken ill, he would most likely have fallen forward onto it, or slumped from his chair to the floor beside it. He would not have moved 8 feet before collapsing. So he was not at the desk when he died. Numero, he was standing somewhere near the fireplace. He was facing the door when he fell, which suggests either that he was moving toward the door, or that he was looking at the door for some reason when he collapsed. Someone knocked at the door? Perhaps. Or perhaps he heard something outside the door. Or perhaps he was going to answer the door. We do not know, but he was up, he was moving, and then something happened. Holmes walked to the spot where Sir Arthur had fallen. He knelt and examined the carpet closely. "Watson, come and see this." I knelt beside him. He was pointing to a small area of the carpet, about 6 inches across. "The pile of the carpet here is very slightly discolored. See how it is faintly yellow, as compared to the deeper red of the surrounding fibers." I looked. I could see a very faint discoloration. "Something has been spilled here, Holmes, some liquid, which has stained the carpet, though only very slightly." "Yes, and note the shape of the stain. It is roughly circular, about 6 inches in diameter, consistent with a small amount of liquid having been dropped from perhaps 2 feet above the floor. From Sir Arthur's hand? Perhaps. Or from a glass that he was holding, a glass that has since been removed and washed. The port glass, perhaps, or perhaps something else. I should very much like to have Dr. Palmer's report on his examination of the port bottle, and I should like to speak with Dr. Palmer himself. Then we shall visit him." "Yes. But first there is someone else I wish to speak with, Mr. Anthony Rowley. We left Sir Arthur's study." Holmes locked the door behind us with a key that Mrs. Foster had provided. We returned to the great hall where the housekeeper was waiting for us. "Mrs. Foster, please arrange for the carriage to be brought around. We wish to visit Mr. Anthony Rowley at his family estate." "Of course, Mr. Holmes." The drive to the Rowley estate took perhaps 40 minutes through the snowy lanes. It was a smaller estate than the Blackthorns, but well kept and prosperous. The house was a red brick Georgian building, less imposing than Blackthorn Manor, but attractive in its own way. We were received by an elderly manservant and shown into a comfortable sitting room. Mr. Anthony Rowley joined us a few minutes later. He was a young man of perhaps 28, tall, fair-haired, blue-eyed, handsome in a quiet, unassuming way. He was dressed in the sober clothes of a gentleman in mourning. His expression as he greeted us was one of guarded courtesy. Dr. Watson, please sit down. My father is not at home today, but I am at your service. We have come from Blackthorn Manor. We are investigating the circumstances of Sir Arthur Blackthorn's death." Rowley's face grew pale, but his expression did not change. "I see. And why have you come to me?" "Because we have been informed that you were on terms of some difficulty with Sir Arthur before his death, that you had wished to marry his daughter, and that he had refused his consent." Rowley was silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. "That is correct, Mr. Holmes. I love Emma. I hope to marry her. Sir Arthur refused. He believed I was not wealthy enough to be worthy of her." "And how did you feel about his refusal?" "Angry, frustrated, heartbroken, but not, Mr. Holmes, murderous. If that is what you are implying, I am not implying anything. I am gathering information." Rowley nodded slowly. "I understand, and I will tell you the truth. I dislike Sir Arthur. I thought him a proud and unfeeling man. I thought he cared more for his family name and his position in society than for his daughter's happiness. I told him so, in fact, when we last spoke. It was an unpleasant conversation. We parted on bad terms." "When was that conversation?" "About 3 weeks before his death, in the middle of November." "Have you seen Miss Emma since her father's death?" "I have seen her once, very briefly, at her father's funeral. We were not able to speak privately. She was surrounded by her family and by mourners." "But you intend to continue your suit?" Rowley looked at Holmes directly. "Yes, Mr. Holmes. I intend to marry Emma if she will have me. Her father's death, however tragic, has removed the obstacle to our marriage. I will not pretend otherwise. But I did not kill him. On my honor, I did not kill him. Where were you on the night of the 13th of December? At home, here. I dined with my father and mother. I retired to bed at about 11 o'clock. My valet can confirm that I did not leave the house that night. Holmes made another note in his book. Thank you, Mr. Rowley. You have been candid. I appreciate it. One further question. Do you know anything about the painting at Blackthorn Manor? The one called The Watching Woman? Rowley's expression changed, just slightly, but I saw it. I know of the painting, Mr. Holmes. Everyone in this district knows of it. It has a reputation. What have you heard about it? That it is cursed. That every man who has owned it has died. That Sir Arthur was the 5th owner to die in the same manner. It is the talk of the county. And do you believe the painting is cursed? Rowley smiled thinly. I am not a superstitious man, Mr. Holmes. I do not believe in curses. But I confess that the pattern is remarkable. 5 deaths. All in the same manner. It does seem to defy natural explanation. Have you ever seen the painting? Some years ago. I was invited to Blackthorn Manor for a hunt ball. Sir Arthur showed me the painting himself. He was very proud of it. He spoke at length of its history and its supposed curse. What did you think of it? Rowley considered. It is a remarkable painting, very well executed. The eyes are extraordinary. They seem to follow you wherever you stand. I found it, I must admit, somewhat unsettling. In what way unsettling? I could not say precisely. There was simply something about it that made me uncomfortable. I did not care to look at it for very long. I was glad, at the end of the evening, to leave the room where it hung. Holmes nodded thoughtfully. He asked a few more questions about various small matters, and then we took our leave. Back in the carriage, riding through the snow, Holmes was silent for some time. Well, Watson, what is your impression of Mr. Anthony Rowley? He seems an honest young man, Holmes. His grief at losing Miss Emma is real, and his anger at Sir Arthur is understandable. But I do not believe he is a murderer. Perhaps not. But he has a motive, and he has admitted that he was on bad terms with Sir Arthur. We cannot dismiss him from our list of suspects. You have a list of suspects, Holmes. I have a mental list, Watson. It grows longer with every hour. Mr. Rowley, Miss Emma, Lady Blackthorn, Dr. Palmer, Mrs. Foster, any of the servants, any of the tenants, any of Sir Arthur's business rivals, any of the 4 families whose previous owners of the painting died. The list is very long, Watson, very long indeed. And how do we narrow it? By seeking the connection between the 5 deaths. Once we understand what connects them, we shall understand who is behind them, and then the list will narrow itself. We returned to Blackthorn Manor. We took our luncheon in the small dining room. Mrs. Foster served us herself and answered further questions as Holmes asked them. She confirmed the routines of Sir Arthur's household. She described the habits and personalities of the various servants. She spoke of Sir Arthur's business affairs, of his friendships, of his family relations. After luncheon, Holmes asked to see Sir Arthur's personal papers. They are in his study, Mr. Holmes, in the desk. Lady Blackthorn has not yet sorted through them. We returned to the study. Holmes seated himself at Sir Arthur's desk. He opened each drawer in turn. The desk contained the usual papers of a wealthy country gentleman: correspondence, financial records, estate accounts, legal documents, personal letters. Holmes examined each item carefully. Most he set aside without comment. A few he examined at length. A few he placed in a small pile of their own. After nearly 2 hours, he leaned back in the chair and looked at me. Watson, Sir Arthur was researching the history of the painting, very carefully, over a period of several years. He pointed to the small pile of papers. These are his notes. He had traced the ownership of the painting back to its first appearance in 1863. He had gathered information about each of the previous owners. He had compiled a detailed record of the circumstances of each death. He was clearly aware of the pattern that his wife described to us, and he was trying to understand it. Had he made any progress? Yes. In his final notes, dating from November of this year, he indicates that he had made an important discovery. He does not specify what the discovery was, but he mentions in one place that he intended to consult a specialist, someone whose expertise would help him confirm what he suspected. Who? He does not name the person, but he indicates that this specialist lives in London and specializes in the technical analysis of oil paintings. Sir Arthur planned to contact this specialist in December. He wrote a letter of introduction. The letter is here in his desk, but it was never sent. Holmes held up the letter. He died before he could send it, Watson. He set the letter down. But there is more. Look at this. He pointed to a folder that lay separately from the other papers. This folder contains what appears to be Sir Arthur's speculations about the painting, his theories about what it might contain. Contain? Yes, Watson. Sir Arthur had come to believe that the painting itself, as a physical object, contained something, not merely in its image, but in its structure. He believed that the canvas or the frame might be concealing something, and he had begun to devise methods of examining the painting to test his theory. Do the notes indicate what he thought was hidden? He speculates about several possibilities. A document of some kind, a message, perhaps a will, perhaps a confession. He is not certain, but he was convinced that something was hidden in the painting and that the pattern of deaths must be connected to that hidden thing. Someone is killing the owners to prevent them from discovering what is hidden. That is precisely what Sir Arthur seems to have concluded, Watson. And I believe he was correct. Holmes gathered the papers together. We must return to the library. I want to examine the painting more thoroughly. We returned to the library. Holmes stood before the painting for a long time. He examined it minutely from every angle. He examined the frame. He examined the surface of the paint. He examined the back of the canvas, insofar as he could without removing the painting from the wall. At last he turned to me. Watson, I want to take this painting off the wall. I want to examine it thoroughly. And I want to do so tonight, when the house is quiet and no one will disturb us. Tonight? Yes. I have a feeling, Watson. A feeling that this mystery is close to its resolution. And I have a feeling that the resolution lies within this painting itself. That evening, after Mrs. Foster and the servants had gone to bed, Holmes and I returned to the library. We had brought with us the tools that Holmes needed for a thorough examination: his magnifying glass, a set of small chisels, a candle, a small mirror. We carefully lifted the painting off the wall. It was heavier than I had expected. We laid it face down on a large table in the center of the library, spreading a soft cloth beneath it to protect the frame. Holmes began his examination. He examined the back of the canvas. He examined the wooden stretcher on which the canvas was mounted. He examined the frame from behind. He was looking for something, some sign that the painting had been altered or that something had been added to it. For a long time he found nothing. The construction of the painting seemed entirely conventional. Canvas stretched on wooden stretchers, frame made of carved and gilded wood, backing paper covering the rear. Then, quite suddenly, he stopped. Watson, come here. I moved to his side. He was pointing at the wooden stretcher at the top of the painting. Look at this joint, Watson, where the two pieces of wood come together at the corner. Do you see how it has been recently disturbed? The wood here is slightly lighter in color than the surrounding wood, and there are small scratches around the joint. I looked. He was right. The corner of the stretcher had been recently opened, or at least examined. Someone has been trying to get into the stretcher, very recently, within the last few weeks. Sir Arthur? Or someone else? Holmes took one of his small chisels. He worked it carefully into the joint. With gentle pressure, he pried the corner of the stretcher open. Inside the hollow of the wooden stretcher, wedged tightly, was a small object. Holmes reached in with a pair of thin metal tweezers and withdrew it. It was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, sealed with red wax. Holmes held it up in the light of the candle. So, Watson, something was hidden in the painting, something worth killing 5 men over. He carried the folded paper carefully to a nearby chair. He sat down. He broke the seal. The paper was old, very old, perhaps 30 years old. It had been folded many times. The handwriting was faded but still legible. Holmes read the document in silence. His face grew more and more grave as he read. At last he looked up at me. "Watson, this is a confession, written by a man named Edward Whitby, dated the 14th of May, 1863. In this document, Edward Whitby confesses to the murder of his brother, Jonathan Whitby, and to the theft from his brother of certain valuable properties. Whitby, the name of the art dealer who first sold the painting. Yes, Watson, Jonathan. Whitby, the art dealer, was murdered by his brother Edward in April of 1863. The murder was never discovered. Jonathan Whitby's death was recorded as accidental. He was believed to have fallen from a bridge into the Thames one evening and drowned. But he was murdered by his brother? So this document states. Edward Whitby, having killed his brother and inherited his properties, was so troubled by his conscience that he wrote out this full confession. But he could not bring himself to give it to the authorities. Instead, he concealed it in the stretcher of a painting that had been in his brother's shop at the time of the murder. A painting that had been brought to his brother by an anonymous young man. The Watching Woman. Yes, Watson, the Watching Woman. Edward Whitby then sold the painting through his brother's now inherited business. To the first buyer who came along, to Lord Marcus Blackwood. So the painting is not cursed, but it contains a confession that would have destroyed Edward Whitby if it had ever been discovered. Precisely. Edward Whitby was killing the owners of the painting to protect his secret. Every 4 to 11 years, an owner would show signs of curiosity about the painting, of wanting to examine it, of speculating about its history. And Edward Whitby, watching from the shadows, would arrange for that owner to die before they could discover what he had hidden. But Holmes, Edward Whitby was writing this confession in 1863. He must have been at least 20 or 25 at that time, which means that he is now at least 50 or 55 years old, perhaps older. He is still alive. He may be, or he may not be. If he is dead, then someone else knows the secret and has continued the killings. But if he is alive, then he is our killer, and we must find him. How do we find a man named Edward Whitby who has been in hiding for 30 years? Holmes smiled thinly. Watson, we do not need to find Edward Whitby. Edward Whitby will find us. What do you mean? Consider this. Edward Whitby has been watching the owners of this painting for 30 years. He knows every detail of their lives. He has connections in every household that has owned the painting. He has been alerted every time an owner has shown too much interest in the painting itself. And now Sir Arthur Blackthorne has been murdered. His widow has come to consult a detective. That detective has come to Blackthorne Manor. He has spent the day examining the painting. Edward Whitby knows we are here, Watson. He knows we are close to the truth, and he will come, tonight, to silence us before we can reveal what we have found. Tonight? Yes, Watson, tonight. Have your revolver ready. We hid the confession carefully. We restored the painting to its position on the wall. We locked the library door. We retired to our guest bedrooms in the east wing. But we did not sleep. At approximately 2 o'clock in the morning, we heard sounds from the direction of the library. Very faint, very careful. The sounds of someone moving through a large house trying not to be heard. Holmes and I rose silently. We took our revolvers. We crept down the corridor. The library door was unlocked. The door was slightly ajar. Warm candlelight glowed from within. We approached quietly. We looked through the gap in the door. A man was in the library. He was standing before the painting. He was holding a small candle. He was examining the frame with a set of tools. A small candle. He was examining the frame with a set of tools. He was elderly, perhaps 60 years old, tall, thin, gray-haired, dressed in the sober clothes of a professional gentleman. But there was something about him that I recognized. Holmes and I exchanged a glance. Then Holmes pushed the door open. The man spun around. His face went pale in the candlelight. It was Dr. Palmer, the Blackthorne family physician, the doctor who had examined Sir Arthur's body, who had tested the port, who had declared the death to be natural, The doctor who had, we now realized, attended every previous owner of the painting. Dr. Palmer, whose real name was Edward Whitby. He stared at us. He did not move. "Dr. Palmer," Holmes said quietly, "or should I say Mr. Whitby, please put down your tools. It is over." Dr. Palmer, or Edward Whitby, stood motionless for a long moment. Then, slowly, he set his tools on the table. He turned to face us. "How did you know?" "The confession, Mr. Whitby. Written by your own hand 30 years ago. Hidden in the painting. We found it this afternoon." Whitby was silent. His face was very pale but very calm. "I have waited for this moment for 30 years, Mr. Holmes. I have always known that someday it would come. That someday someone would find the confession and understand what I had done. I am, in a strange way, almost relieved." He looked at me. "Doctor, you will not believe me when I tell you this, but I did not want to kill any of them. Not one of them. Not Lord Blackwood, not Sir Reginald, not Mr. Grey, not Lord Wentworth, not Sir Arthur. I liked most of them. I would have preferred to let them live. But every one of them in his own time began to show curiosity about the painting, about its history, about what might be hidden within it, and I could not permit that. So I killed them." "How did you kill them?" "With a poison of my own devising. A rare compound that produces symptoms indistinguishable from natural heart failure. I administered it in small doses, over a period of weeks, mixed with medicines that I prescribed for their various minor complaints. Each of them died believing that he was dying of natural causes. Each of them died in his own home, in his own chair, without knowing that his death was other than the ordinary end of a life well lived." He paused. His face was infinitely weary. "I am tired, Mr. Holmes. I have been carrying this burden for 30 years. I have killed 5 innocent men to protect a secret that I could have simply confessed and had done with. I have watched my life narrow and darken with every year. I am tired." He looked at Holmes with a strange, almost peaceful expression. "Will you take me to Scotland Yard now?" "Yes, Mr. Whitby, I will take you to Scotland Yard." Edward Whitby was tried at the Old Bailey in the spring of 1894. He confessed to all 5 murders. He was convicted and sentenced to death. He was hanged in July of that year. Lady Blackthorne and her daughter returned to Blackthorne Manor after the trial. Miss Emma married Mr. Anthony Rowley in the autumn. They had 4 children and a long and happy life together. The painting, The Watching Woman, was donated to the National Gallery, where it hangs to this day. The confession that had been hidden within it was placed in the archives of Scotland Yard, where it remains as evidence of the strange and terrible case of the painting that killed everyone who owned it. Some months later, on a quiet evening in Baker Street, Holmes and I sat by the fire. "Holmes," I said, "one thing about the case still puzzles me. Edward Whitby, or Dr. Palmer, must have earned the trust of 5 separate families over 30 years. He must have made himself indispensable to each of them. How did he manage such a thing?" Holmes drew upon his pipe. "He was a genuinely good doctor, Watson. That was his mask. He treated his patients well. He earned their trust honestly. And then, when the moment came, he betrayed that trust and killed them. It was the perfect disguise. Because a doctor, above all others, has access to a patient's most intimate moments and to the medicines that can either save or take a life." He was silent for a moment. "There is a lesson in this case, Watson, and it is a dark one. The people we trust most are often the ones best positioned to harm us. The physician who cares for our bodies, the lawyer who advises us on our affairs, the clergyman who counsels our souls, all of them have power over us. All of them have access to our vulnerabilities, and in most cases they use that power and access for our benefit. But not always, not always." He looked at the fire. "I do not know how one guards against such a thing, Watson. Perhaps one cannot. Perhaps trust is always a risk. Perhaps the only defense is to trust wisely, and to remain alert to signs that our trust has been misplaced." Outside, the winter wind moved through the empty streets. Snow was beginning to fall again. The gas lamps of Baker Street flickered in the cold, and in a small stone chapel in Surrey 5 men lay in their graves. Lord Marcus Blackwood, Sir Reginald Ashworth, Mr. Percival Grey. Lord Wentworth, Sir Arthur Blackthorne. Each had trusted a doctor. Each had died for the trust. Each had never known why. Thank you for listening to 221B Chronicles. If this mystery gripped you from start to finish, please subscribe and ring the notification bell for new Sherlock Holmes mysteries every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. Until we meet again, dear listener, the game is always afoot.